I would like to introduce our next speaker. We have Sam Manger here, and Dr. Sam is a clinician and an academic, general practitioner and health care consultant with a focus on lifestyle as well as social determinants. Sam is an academic lead at James Cook University, immediate past president of the Australasian Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and Equally Well Australia, and host of the GP Show podcast. And Sam's going to be talking to us about the GP Encounter, embedding that personal agency and autonomy. And I don't know what I may have done there, but you're there. Okay.
Here I am. Thank you very much. Cheers. Hello, everyone. Well, I appreciate that we're running late, and I'm also the last thing holding you between going home, so I feel somewhat guilty about that. But all the same, I'm just going to do my talk anyway. All right, so I'm going to be talking to you about patient agency and autonomy. And of course, we've done acknowledgement country, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to do something a little bit different, because I usually, if you've ever seen any of my talks, I love detail, I love mechanisms, I love getting right into the science. But I'm going to not do that so much for the first part, because I'm going to talk about my own experience, and I've never actually shared what I'm going to share in public today. And then I'm going to talk about the context of providing healthcare, because when we're talking about patient agency, we've got to think, okay, well, patient agency in what? Well, in healthcare, and then we have to understand the context of what we're trying to change here, because healthcare is a ship that seems to be slightly sinking from my point of view, and we need a fairly significant revolution in healthcare. And what we're talking about here is part of that, but we also need to understand what we're trying to change in its place. And then I appreciate that we've got health professionals and lived experience in the audience. So then I was thinking, well, then how do I do a talk for both health professionals that's useful and people with lived experience that's useful? So the second part of this is for health professionals, and the last part is for those with lived experience, but hopefully everyone gets something out of everything. So that's me on the right. Now, when I was a teenager, I started to develop quite significant pain. When I was about 16, I saw my first specialist. I then was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. And then later I was diagnosed with genetic connective tissue disease. And as a result, I was offered many medications, autoimmune medications and so on. But instead I started doing yoga. And from there I did yoga, and I've been doing yoga almost every day for the past 30 years, or 20 plus years. And I've been meditating most days, and if I don't, within 2 to 3 days, I'm in quite significant pain. So that was a response, and that's how I sort of got through that period of my life. And I say this because I don't need to be told that patient agency matters. I don't need a study to tell me that. I don't need anyone to tell me that. I know from first-hand experience that what I do in my body, in my life, changes trajectories massively. And it's one of the most powerful things I can do. Then when I was an intern and resident, which is a very difficult time, 2 of my colleagues, my fellow interns, committed suicide because of the workload and what was going on in their life. Towards the end of my own training, I went into depression myself and anxiety, and I saw psychiatrists, and I saw psychologists, and I still see a psychologist, and I still see a psychiatrist. And I responded to that similarly with addressing those sort of root determinant factors as best as I could, but it requires absolute regular maintenance. And that's this picture on the left, or your right, my left, which is a men's group that I set up on a Sunday morning, where we go running, 5Ks, we get in some cold mountain creek water. I live in sort of country Queensland. It gets to about 4 or 5 degrees in winter. And then we do a little fire, we do 45 minutes of breath work and meditation. We connect and we share about being a man and what it means being a husband or a father or a friend and so on. And then we go on about our day. But I know that I have to do this. You'll see me neck deep in a creek Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, because that's what I need to do to keep my mental health. 48 hours is about how long that effect lasts, and then I start to tank again. So it's something that I know from my experience that we have to go on this journey of discovery. Now, ideally, we find a healthcare system that actually supports that, supports our own journey of discovery, and is actually competent enough to help us guide that. Because I fear that there's either an ignorance or there's a, let's say, a misguided capitalization. But this, my lived experience, ironically, came way before my professional experience. As I said, I was a teenager when I was diagnosed with these first sort of chronic pain conditions. And that deeply informed, I was the one in med school who was coming up with ideas around yoga and mindfulness and meditation. And people were like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Yeah, I was definitely the outsider in med school. But I came GP of the year the other day. So, I do believe that actually the professional, we were told when I was studying medicine that we should not let our experience inform what we do, right? We should stick to the books, stick to the guidelines, stick to the evidence. And I disagree with that then, and I disagree with it far more now. We should be informed. Clinical experience should inform practice, and lived experience of professionals and obviously the people we serve should inform clinical practice. And so this on your left is when I was running in a CCU, which is a long-stay mental health unit, and we were running lifestyle medicine programs, food and mood. That's Scotty on the right. He's a mental health nurse who happened to be a chef, which is very convenient. And then, and we used to run a lot of these programs because I wanted to bring in my lived experience into my professional practice. But so I just want to provide that little bit of context. As I said, I don't need persuading. I know that this actually, what we're talking about here, really makes a foundational fundament. If I hadn't gone and gone on the journey of self-discovery, as it were, into what is actually affecting me, I've not really much doubt that I would have ended up on a number of autoimmune medications. I would have ended up on chronic pain medication. I would have ended up on lots of psychotropic medication. But I was lucky that certain things fell in the right place, and I was interested enough that I went down that road. But not everyone has that luck. So if we look at the context of healthcare, there's a few things I want to just highlight, because when we're talking about what you can get, the best you can get out of a GP visit, for example, we kind of need to understand what it's like being a GP these days. Things are not great, let me tell you that. And it's obvious because no one can get into a GP, right? So that's obvious that things are not great from that point of view. But from our point of view, the burnout rates are skyrocketing. In 2013, it was about 20% of GPs felt burnt out or had depression and anxiety. During COVID, it went up to about 41%. Now, last year, the survey showed that 71% of GPs report burnout symptoms, and 64% of us want to cut down our hours or stop working completely, which is why it's hard to get into a GP, because we're all working 2 days, because it's just so taxing working 5 days. And there's a reason for that. There's lots of reasons for that. But some of the reasons it's just medicine's more complex, there's more problems than there ever was, there's more investigations than there ever were, there are more treatments than there ever were. So trying to fit all that into 15 minutes, you feel like you do a crap job because you can't fit it into 15 minutes. And so you constantly feel like you're delivering sort of poor, superficial care, at least that's how I feel. And so more and more GPs who do really, really care, they really want to be there for you, just don't feel that. And likewise, you don't feel that. Now, the Productivity Commission in 2017 said that this system, this supportive payments, for example, is actually, it supports illness rather than wellness, but it's only countered by the ingenuity and the ethical belief of providers to swim against that current. So this was 7 years ago, and I certainly saw this when I was an intern 14 odd years ago, is that we would all work overtime, and we would be told not to claim for it, we would be told we won't get paid for it, but we all worked overtime, 60, 70-hour weeks, you get paid for 38 hours, but you work the extra 20, 30, 40 hours. And because we care, right? So we put in that extra effort, but that compensation system where we're working is now failing, and that's what the stats are showing. We cannot keep pushing the system. It is stretched as far as it can stretch, and it is now cracking and popping. So I just want to put that into context about how actually from a healthcare provider point of view, how this is a difficult thing. Now this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more to the health professionals, but hopefully to everyone as well. And that's really to highlight the importance of patient agency, that it is actually a core foundation of evidence-based medicine. The evidence-based medicine triad, which is the foundation of what evidence-based medicine is that best external evidence, so the randomized controlled trials, the observational trials, epidemiology, et cetera, right? Yes, that's great. But we seem to hyper-focus on that point. We need to zoom out and actually remember clinical experience matters, and bang, there it is. Patient values and expectations, lived experience, patient agency is there. It is a core tenet of evidence-based medicine. And we get the best outcomes. And why do we get the best outcomes? This is from The Life of Brian, a great quote. And we're all individuals. I'm not, right? Because one of the things lived experience and patient agency allows is personalization. Right? So when me or a patient, anyone comes in with a problem, yes, we can cookie cutter it, we can treat it with this medication, you've got this condition, I'm going to treat it with this medication, a pill for every ill, right? But instead, we can listen, and we can really listen, and we can understand how we can personalize that. Like I said, from my journey, it was things like yoga, it was things like cold water, it was things like breath work that ended up working and still work for me, and I hope they continue to do so. But when we look at the evidence here, it supports this as well. This is a paper that was published in the journal Cell about 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm just highlighting the points of personalization here, is that they took 800 people and they gave them exactly the same meals for a number of weeks, so 46,000 meals. But what they showed there was that despite the people had exactly the same meals, there was incredible diversity in the way people responded biologically. So here's some of those stats. So people's hunger changed, their energy intake changed, their time to the next meal changed, their alertness changed, their sugar-glucose response changed, their insulin response changed to exactly the same meal. So this one-size-fits-all approach should be dead, and it is going to hopefully die. But the point is, we don't have yet fancy personalized genetic medicine, and even when we do, I don't think it's ever going to tell us what your intuition tells you, what you yourself kind of know to be true from what you've tried and experienced. And so I highlight this, that the point of us working in a shared relationship is that we can personalize things to better suit. Obviously, I'm making this case to the health professionals out there, but to everyone as well. And the studies to show this. This is a big study that was published, 12-month study looking at low-fat versus low-carb diet, the age-old battle, which is incredibly painful. Because the point is that it is actually personalized as well, as this is direct from that study. The substantial variability of weight loss response suggests some strategies work better for others. This is a sort of scale. You see, it worked really well for some people, didn't work that well for others. Personalization, once again, matters. Here was a fascinating study published in 2021. So what they did is they took 107 people, they did their genotype, which means they looked at their genetic profile, and they found those who were predisposed to being overweight and those who were protected against being overweight. Then they hid those results, and they told the 107 people the wrong information, just random information. Yeah, you're high risk for being overweight, you're not high risk for being overweight. It was wrong, it was just false information. But they wanted people to believe that that is actually what their genes were doing and telling them. Then they started to give them meals, they started to see how they responded. And not only did they watch their weight and things like that, they watched their satiety and their time to fill and their hunger, but they also measured their hunger hormones like GLP-1. For those who don't know, GLP-1 is the hormone which is the big sort of craze at the moment because that's where Ozempic and those sort of weight loss medications, that's how they work. So they were measuring our internal versions of GLP-1. And what they showed was that people's beliefs were a stronger predictor on their satiety and their weight and their hormones than was their genetic profile. So what we believe about ourselves is actually more potent than our actual in this study anyway, than our genetic predisposition, right? Now, obviously, there's exceptions to that, but this is a powerful indicator of how we think, what our agency matters, and how we feel about something and how it matters. And why else does that matter? Because, again, if we listen, if we take patient agency into account, we build therapeutic relationships, we build a shared experience. And actually, again, meta-analyses have showed here that actually the therapeutic relationship may actually be more important than the type of psychotherapy we're doing. It may actually be the best predictor of outcomes, right? So of course it matters. It doesn't matter if you're doing CBT with someone you hate, right? What matters is if you're doing any therapy with someone you connect with. And for those, again, health professionals, I don't know how many there actually are, but we are seeing patient complaints go up for all the reasons I've kind of mentioned. And at the root of that is often communication, right? And so, again, patient agency matters. We've got to be able to listen. We've got to be able to communicate. We've got to be able to bring in people's experiences. And now I want to finally talk to sort of health professionals out there. Yep, awesome, thanks. Let's talk about humility, right? Because the truth is that the days of the I've said this to a few doctors before and not had a great response, but the days of the all-knowing doctor, they're gone. They are dead. And it's the sooner we accept that, the better. Because there is so much information out there now, and I'll show you the next slide, but also it's just the complexity of the people we're dealing with. As I said, every person is individual. We have to listen, we have to incorporate that, otherwise we're never going to be able to come up with the best outcomes for that person, for us as providers, because it's incredibly satisfying when you help people, and it also saves a lot of money, which is good. So replace that with a shared journey. Now, when it comes to humility and research, just to put this into context, there are about, and this is growing at about 4 to 5% every year, and now with artificial intelligence, I don't know what's going to happen, but there's 2.5 million papers published in science and medicine every year. That's about 7,000 articles a day. Now, I read a lot of articles, but there ain't no way I'm going to read 7,000 articles a day. So it's just impossible to be able to keep up to date with all the information. So you have no choice but to be humbled. We have no choice but to work with our patients. We have no choice but to, well, in my opinion, we have no choice but to empower our patients to become their own sources and filters for information, and then we work together to go through that and decide what the best choice would be. So how do I incorporate lived experience as a GP? This is a little note from one of my patients, which is lovely. But the first thing is I consider my own story. It sounds kind of selfish and self-absorbed, but I suppose the reality is we all go through our own filters. But I ask myself this question, and this informs my professional mission, which is how would I want myself or my loved ones to be treated? Right? That informs, because when patients ask me what should I do, I'm thinking, what if you were my mother or my father or my brother, right, or my sister or my children? How would I want you to be treated? And I want you to get the best care, and that has to mean all of the things that I'm talking about. Hearing other people's stories, as was mentioned just before, is a very powerful thing. With curiosity and humility, as I've said, using other people's stories is very, obviously maintaining confidentiality, but using other people's stories is incredibly powerful. Training in whole-of-person care, which has come up in some of the workshops. Resources, I'm going to mention some of those in models of care, I'm going to touch on those as well. And again, this was highlighted in the last talk, which was great, about the importance of story. When we are when we talk about behavior change, right, and the communicating that behavior, when we're trying to inspire and motivate change, Aristotle had it 2 and a bit thousand years ago, right? He had Aristotle's mode of persuasion. You need 3 points in your verbal communication as a general rule to persuade people. You need logos, you need logic, you need some sort of facts of some degree. You need ethos, you need credibility and trust, which means you've got a therapeutic relationship with the person. But you need pathos, you need story. We are far more story narrative based than we are logic based, in my experience. And in fact, I would say that the internet has almost proved to us that story is more powerful than a lot of evidence. And I think that as long as medicine sticks in the old paradigm of needing a randomized control trial for everything, we are going to keep sinking. We have to open up medicine. All right, so now to think about how we can bring agency into the appointment from a lived experience or from a patient, consumer, client point of view. I don't have a paper I can cite here, so I'm using this as my just clinical experience. So apologies, this is imperfect, this is incomplete. But these are the 4 things I sort of break it down to in my mind. Consult hygiene, which we talked about today with the consumer resource I'm going to show you again today. Resourcing, know thy power, aka know your power, just as I have learned to know mine. And health system evolution, which we're talking about here today, being part of the next iteration of healthcare, because you all play an incredibly important role in that. So let's talk about consult hygiene. This is just so basic, it's almost boring, but bear with me. Like I said, when people come in with 7 things on their list and they book a 15-minute appointment, it's really fucking annoying. Because that gives me 2 minutes per problem. I cannot do my job in 2 minutes, right? I'm good, but I'm not that good. And it's, I want to help you, but I can't help you in 2 minutes. So please book adequate time. Give us the chance. If you've got a good GP, give us the chance, right? Because I tell you, by the end of the day, I'm almost non-communicative because I'm so, destroyed by the sort of empathy that I've let go in a very small amount of time in an intense, constant day, right? My wife is GP too. It's a good thing we work on separate days because it wouldn't work. Come prepared, and that's where that consumer resource, which is the next slide, is just a fantastic thing, and I thank Equally Well Australia for making that, because as was said, there's not a lot of that out there, right? So it's fantastic that's been done. Be honest, and I have to say, this is not easy. It's not easy to be honest when there is a power imbalance. But all the same, stand up for yourself, right? If that doesn't feel right, just say, this doesn't feel right, right? Or just say, can I get a second opinion? Or what do you think about this? I respect your opinion, doctor, but I also am wondering this, right? You can phrase things in a way that reduces their barriers and defensiveness, but allow your opinion to be expressed. Or at least say, what do you think about yoga? And if they go, oh, it's nonsense, I go, okay, well, find another doctor. But the other thing is take notes, because if you're in my consult, it's very quick, it's very fast-paced, right? So I write a lot of notes for my patients, but I encourage you to take notes too. And book follow-up appointments. This is obviously the resource. I'm not going to talk about that. It's a fantastic thing. So now resourcing. And I think of resourcing from a biopsychosocial, cultural, and spiritual point of view. So there are many types of resources that we can build into our life. You know, whether that's it's support in consults, or it's getting second opinions, or it's psychological, social support, et cetera, cultural support, and so on. Community is a huge one. This came up in some of the workshops today, whereby one of the things I did about a couple of years ago, because I found out about this great program in the community, I thought, wait a minute, how many things are going on that I'm not actually aware of? So I ended up getting my nurse to go, I paid her to go out to the community for a couple of days and just do a social prescription map. I wanted to know about every community service, every exercise program, every little NGO-free thing. I wanted to know about all of it, right? And she came back with this amazing list of all the things that exist in our community, and I had no idea, right? So there are so many resources out there. We shouldn't rely on a NGO sector, but we should at least know that it's there. Online resources, and I will say artificial intelligence, right? A show of hands, how many people have really played and used artificial intelligence? Okay, that's not bad, actually. That's pretty good. But I would encourage you to really start using it, because if you've got a medical condition, just pop it in there and see what it tells you to do. Don't necessarily do it, but but find out what it says, right? There's no harm in getting more information. And the other thing I would say is something I see both in mainstream or allopathic or whatever you want to call it, medicine, and also natural medicine, is people are, I'm not sure what the right word is, it's not coming to my mind, extortion isn't quite the right word, but it's that they're just saying, you know, oh, go take these, go take this, go take this, go take this, right? The options aren't being discussed, the benefits aren't being discussed, the potential risks and biases involved aren't being discussed. Now, when people come come to me with, 10 supplements, and I'm quite open to natural approaches, but I say, well, what's the justification for all of these? Oh, I don't know, they just told me to take it. I'm like, well, no, you need to be in charge. You need to ask them. I don't care if you agree with their philosophy. You can agree with naturopathy. That's no problem. But they better have a bloody good reason that they're giving you $500 worth of supplements a month. Right? Now, if their reason is purely that, in my experience, this works, okay, then it's up to you to make the decision as to whether you think that's good enough justification for you to spend that money and trial that treatment. But don't just believe people. Either get the studies, or get the logic, or get the experience. But don't just buy into it. I will say that online there are more and more solutions popping up here. This is one organization, Patients Like Me, which is, I think, American, but it's a global thing. And, there's 850,000 people now, and they put in their experiences, their condition, their symptoms, the treatments they've tried, and they rate them and they rank them. And so we're starting to collate these sort of crowd-sourced sources of information that we can really start sharing. I would really encourage us to think about something like this. And as I say, artificial intelligence, the easiest way to simply do is just go Bing and Copilot. That's a very simple one to do. And just ask things. What are some cognitive behavioral techniques for social anxiety? What are some diet types to lose weight? What are some Australian-made online courses for depression? And it will give you that information, right? So there's nothing wrong with questioning and getting a second opinion from that. I like to think of sort of artificial intelligence versus ancient intelligence. And ancient intelligence is our intuition, it's our ancestors, it's our community. So we have lots of sources of intelligence out there that we can start interacting with. Now, the know thy power within thyself, right? So I give many hours of lectures on this one topic, right? And I'd love to go into it, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do one slide on it. This is a patient who came and saw me for a second opinion with type 2 diabetes. They're on 2 different medications. They had hypertension and obstructive sleep apnea as well. As you can see on the left here, their diabetes was very poorly controlled. That should be less than 7. 11 is very bad. And they're on a path of pretty bad trajectory. Within 3 months, we'd reversed their diabetes. And then I stopped their medications, and 3 months later, it was 5.8. I'm happy to say I've done their blood 3 or 4 more times since this photo, and they're still less than 6. They're still well under control. Now, the point is that I didn't give them any medication to do that. All I did was show them the power in their own life and the power of their own decisions, and they then took the steering wheel, and they then took control. So be aware, just like me, how many times I've been told by specialists that there's nothing you can do about an autoimmune condition except take medication. Well, I have seen many patients, maybe not reverse it, but get significant control, reduce their inflammation massively. I've seen many mental health conditions get better. Now, of course, if people need medication, they deserve and should have medication. But we have to know that the power also within our own choices in our own life. And then health system evolution, where I'm going to sort of wrap this up. As I've made it pretty clear, I hope, we need to embrace change, and change is on our side in that sense. This is done by the Mitchell Institute, Professor Rosemary Calder, another group, who said that they did a review of reviews, as it were, a review of the health system in Australia, and they said it's evident that we need new models of healthcare. We need them, right? We, the health profession, need them. You, the consumer, and those with lived experience need them. But where are we going to get them from? And this is where everyone here and beyond play such a major role. We published on this sort of onion ring model a few years ago, but the point to show that there are many layers with which we can implement change, whether it's one-to-one clinical practice, whether it's shared medical appointments. Sharon Lawn, who's here, raised a question before. She and has involved me doing the first peer support worker trials in primary care in Australia. There are many ways we can start evolving healthcare. There's some amazing practices that are around the world that we can start bringing in, like collaborative practice, which is where we get volunteers to come into the practice, start running cooking groups and exercise groups and care groups and flu clinics and that sort of things, just to support the teams. These are now substantiated models that have evidence, and we can start bringing into the Australian healthcare setting with some confidence. That's the Altogether Better model. So I'm going to wrap this up, and one of the most common questions I get after I speak is, that's awesome, what do we do next? And I would just simply say being here is a good part of that, but when we think about how do we change systems, right, there's this sort of concept that you need to change 51% of people to change the system. We have to change the majority before we change. That's not true. The truth is that you need about 15 to 18% of a population to adopt something new before the early majority then adopt it, and then the late majority and the laggards just go along for the ride, right? And so we don't need that many people. So make noise, keep fighting, keep advocating for change. It will come eventually. If you're interested, I feel bad about this, but there's some self-promotion. Tetiana and I, Tetiana's down here, with this in mind, all of this in mind, we created a 3-week micro-certificate, which we launched at the beginning of this year. And it's lifestyle medicine, social determinants, health coaching, behavior change, medication optimization. We've got some amazing case studies. We've got, I think, about 7 or 9 case studies from around the world. Simon Rosenbaum and Jackie Curtis, and many people who are bringing this into mental health care. And how do you do it? We've got lived experience, nurses, and so on, all sharing how they have gone about bringing this into healthcare. So I encourage you to check out that course. And if you want to go real deep, you can come and study with me at James Cook University in postgraduate. All right, thank you very much.